Hey, welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we grab a listener's question and really dig into the research to pull out the interesting stuff.
Yeah, right into it.
And today we're jumping into something I know a lot of you listening, especially if you're, studying this stuff, are super interested in. AI, um, artificial intelligence in sports performance optimization.
Right, yeah. How algorithms and data are really changing things for athletes.
Totally. Thinking about how data is driving decisions specifically with you, the future experts in mind.
And for this deep dive, we're mainly looking at a really insightful article, Precision Sports Science: What is Next for Data Analytics for Athlete Performance and Well-Being Optimization, from Excel and Dabnitsky, 2024.
Yeah, it's a great piece, really comprehensive.
It gives a solid look at where we are now and where things might be heading.
Exactly. So our mission today is to unpack how AI and data analytics are, kind of revolutionizing sports performance from training to strategy.
Yep. And importantly, highlighting where, your future work, your research can make a real difference. So let's start at the beginning, the evolution of this stuff. It wasn't like teams just flipped a switch and started using machine learning, was it?
No, not at all. The authors, they point out it kind of started with the broadcasters, actually.
Oh, really? Like for the TV audience?
Yeah, exactly. They saw they could make watching the game richer, putting
Right.
real-time stats up on screen, player speeds, maybe probability making a shot, that kind of thing.
Ah, right. Those graphics definitely pull you in more as a fan. But it didn't stay just for entertainment, did it? When did the teams kind of go, aha?
Pretty quickly, actually. Sports managers, scouts, they recognize the power there for evaluating players much better, even trying to predict future potential.
Wow. So using data for big decisions.
Yeah, fed right into team management, who to draft, strategic stuff. It shifted from just saying what happened to figuring out why it happened and maybe what happens next.
Yeah.
A real competitive edge.
Okay, so from fun stats to serious strategy. Now, sports science itself, it's always used stats, right? That's not new.
Oh, absolutely. For decades, research in sports science has leaned on statistical principles, often adapted from fields like medicine, social sciences. Solid statistical proof is key for any credible research.
Sure, you need that validation. But the article mentions a specific challenge with data in sports science compared to those other fields. What's the main difference?
It often comes down to the data sets themselves. We're usually dealing with elite athletes, right?
Right.
So the groups are small, highly specialized, and there's a lot of confidentiality around their data, understandably.
Yeah, you can't just pull up a database of 10,000 Olympic sprinters.
Exactly. So traditional stats, which often need big sample sizes to be powerful, it gets more complicated.
Okay, so how does data analytics help researchers like you tackle that?
Well, analytics gives us a toolkit that's maybe better suited for these smaller, niche data sets. It's a shift in method, really. Allows us to find patterns, build predictive models, even without huge comparison groups. Machine learning techniques, for instance, can be surprisingly effective here.
Interesting. So it's a good fit. But the authors suggest that even with this potential, data analytics isn't maybe being used as much as it could be compared to the old school stats.
That's their take, yeah. They argue there's a real need for more science-backed analytical tools, tools that can properly connect the different bits of knowledge within sports science, biomechanics, physiology, psychology with these newer statistical methods.
Right, bridging those gaps.
The goal is reliable quantitative models that actually help coaches and athletes make better decisions.
Makes total sense. You need the right lens to see what the data is really saying for elite athletes. Okay, let's zoom in on optimizing performance then. Using data and AI at the top level, the article mentions marginal gains. For anyone new to that, what's it mean in sports?
Right, marginal gains. So in elite sports, these athletes are already pushing the absolute limits. Yeah,
Maxed out, basically.
pretty much.
Yeah.
So the focus shifts to finding these tiny, tiny improvements, sometimes just fractions of a percent.
Yeah.
But you add up enough of those small wins across different areas.
And it makes a real difference.
It can be the difference between winning and losing, a significant competitive advantage.
Every little edge. So how does data analytics help find those tiny improvements?
It lets us meticulously link how an athlete performs a specific action to the outcome they want. Think sensors on a tennis player analyzing their reaction, serve the footwork, racket angles, speed, all that.
And connecting it directly to serve accuracy or speed?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or a sprinter's start power off the blocks, stride length. breaking it down into numbers.
I can picture that.
Yep.
But the article also mentions a downside to just looking at groups of athletes' cohort analysis for these very specific tweaks. What's the issue there?
Well, analyzing groups is great for finding general principles, right? Things that work on average. But it doesn't always give clear, actionable advice for one specific athlete. Their body might be different, their technique unique. What's average for the group might be totally wrong for them. They could be an outlier.
That's a really important point for anyone learning about personalized training. So, how do things like wearables and AI tools give that more tailored, immediate feedback?
These technologies let us gather incredibly detailed data on individuals during training, even during games. And crucially, they allow for intensive and rapid feedback.
Right, not waiting weeks for analysis.
Exactly. Wearables track heart rate, sleep, movement, biomechanics, tons of stuff. And AI algorithms can process that almost instantly to give insights the athlete or coach can use right away.
There's a cool example in the article about smart equipment becoming like an assistant trainer on the field. Sounds pretty futuristic.
Yeah, it's fascinating. They mentioned smart boxing gloves, for example. Sensors capture punch force, speed, technique, and the AI behind it using classification algorithms, basically teaching the computer to recognize good versus bad form, give the boxer immediate feedback, like adjust your wrist angle or more power needed.
Wow, the gloves are coaching you. And the authors think this could help athletes who don't have access to like elite coaches.
That's a huge potential benefit, yeah. Relatively low-cost smart gear and software could bring expert-level feedback to athletes everywhere, regardless of funding. It helps athletes help themselves.
That's really exciting for the future, thinking about access. The article also stresses mixing deep sport knowledge with machine learning. That tennis double serve analysis, for instance.
Yeah, that's a great example. They didn't just throw data at a computer. They used their understanding of tennis tactics and biomechanics with machine learning.
To figure out what really mattered.
Exactly. They identified the key things, serve speed, sure,
Yeah.
but also the angle, where it landed, how high it cleared the net, all in the specific context of a doubles match.
So it's not just about the algorithm. You need the human expert who understands the sport to ask the right questions and make sense of the answers. Okay, let's shift focus a bit. What about the gear itself? Equipment design and selection, AI and data's role there.
Right. It's not just the athlete's body. The tools matter. The authors talk about three main goals in equipment design: boosting performance, improving safety, and preventing injuries.
And those goals can sometimes clash, right?
Often, yeah. It's a balancing act. Like you design a tennis racket for maximum power.
Oh, it maybe increases elbow strain or something.
Exactly. The article mentions how technology in tennis, cycling, skiing has definitely boosted performance and changed the physical demands. But sometimes safety took a back seat, like with those larger tennis racket heads that sadly led to injuries for some top female players.
It's always evolving, driven by new materials, computer design. But the article says there's a surprising amount of secrecy around how teams actually choose equipment.
Yeah, it's interesting. Despite all the tech, the specific data and processes for selecting gear often stay hidden. There's not a lot of published research on how specific equipment impacts performance and injuries.
Why is that?
Partly industry confidentiality, protecting trade secrets, and sponsorships play a big role too, right? An athlete might use certain gear because of a deal, not necessarily because it's technically the absolute best for them.
Good point. Sponsorships can muddy the waters. But the authors did see examples where selection is really rigorous and data-driven.
Yes, their own observations in sports like cycling, tennis, rowing, even ice track sports showed really meticulous approaches, detailed performance analysis, lots of feedback from the athletes themselves.
So identifying what matters for performance.
Right, the key performance indicators. And then testing different equipment setups, different combinations, under various conditions to find what works best.
Like tweaking tennis string tension for different courts or changing ski stiffness for snow conditions. Very hands-on. But even with all that, the article notes they aren't necessarily using advanced analytic tools in a formal way.
That's a key observation. They're clearly optimizing through testing, but the formal use of sophisticated analytics, and especially sharing those findings, it seems limited, probably because it's proprietary competitive advantages.
Right. But the potential seems huge, doesn't it? Combining everyday tech, wearables, analytics to really understand how an athlete and their equipment interact for performance and injury prevention.
Absolutely. Imagine continuously tracking how an athlete's movement changes with different bike settings or shoe types in real training, real competition.
That level of insight.
Could lead to super personalized equipment choices, training tweaks, potentially preventing those career-ending injuries. It's definitely a rich area for future research for anyone listening who's interested.
And briefly, they mentioned design methods like the Taguchi method. How could that help balance performance and safety?
Yeah, those are statistical frameworks for optimizing designs by looking at lots of factors and how they interact. Applied to sports gear, it can help find designs that hit a better sweet spot between making you faster and keeping you safer. But
Needs the data.
always comes back to needing enough good data to feed into those methods.
It really does. Okay, let's talk recruitment and team selection. How are AI and data changing how teams pick players? It's got to be more than just the old eye test now.
It definitely is shifting.
Yeah.
Moving away from just gut feelings or basic elimination trials towards more comprehensive selection policies that use sports analytics to inform the decisions.
Inform being the key word there. The article stresses these are tools, right? The final call often still rests with the coaches, the management.
Exactly. Analytics provide valuable, objective insights, help identify talent, assess potential, predict performance. But you still need the human element, team chemistry, leadership, the coach's experience. It's augmenting judgment, not replacing it.
Got it. The article mentions Legal's criteria for soccer performance assessment, which sounds like it could apply to lots of team sports. What's involved there?
Yeah, it's a pretty useful framework. It covers things like creating a detailed baseline profile for each player, not just stats, but physical traits, technical skills, the works.
Multidimensional.
Right. Then constantly monitoring their well-being, physical and mental health. Objectively measuring how training affects them. Tracking performance over time with complex analysis, making sure their skills match what the team needs in competition.
So aligning abilities with demands.
Exactly. Using evidence. And finally, figuring out their weaknesses and strengths to help them improve strategically.
Wow, that's super holistic, really data-driven. And pro football is a big example of investing in this kind of analytics for player care.
Yeah. Football clubs, their players are huge assets, right? So they invest massively in analytics for everything. Sleep, nutrition, psychological monitoring, all aimed at peak performance and health.
But like with equipment, a lot of this is kept confidential, the specific methods and data.
That's generally the case, yeah. Teams use analytics to forecast peaks, identify dips in form, but the how is often proprietary. The authors do suggest that maybe sharing some anonymized data or methods eventually could benefit everyone, help the whole field advance.
Yeah, sharing best practices could really push things forward. Okay, so we've hit on optimizing the physical side. Let's look at AI and data for the athlete's overall wellness and well-being. The article really emphasizes how linked that is to performance.
Absolutely. You
Yeah.
can't separate them. An athlete's well-being is physical, mental, social. It all feeds into their health and their ability to perform consistently at a high level.
And monitoring training load is obviously a huge part of that. Finding that sweet spot between pushing hard and, well, breaking down.
Exactly. Not just the amount of training, but the load relative to what that specific athlete is ready for. But here's a really interesting point the article raises, especially for those of you focused on athlete monitoring. Elite athletes spend a ton of time, maybe up to 80%, not formally training.
80%, that's massive. So what they do in that downtime is super important.
Hugely important. Their general physical activity, how much time they spend sitting, sleep, nutrition, menstrual cycles for female athletes. It all happens in that off-training time and impacts wellness.
And the idea is, if we could gather data on that off-training time,
And combine it with training and competition data, we'd have a much more complete picture, a better screening tool for potential issues, a more nuanced understanding of the athlete's overall state. It's a largely untapped resource right now.
so we can collect all this data now technologically, but is it actually being used effectively day to day to make training and recovery decisions better?
That's the million-dollar question, really. And there's some debate. The tech for collecting data is way ahead, but the author suggests we're still lagging in the information systems and decision support tools needed to really use that data for personalized action.
Which brings us to this precision medicine idea the article uses as a comparison. How does that framework from healthcare apply to sports?
So in healthcare, precision medicine uses data analytics to tailor treatments very specifically, and it constantly learns from individual patient responses.
Okay.
The idea is to do something similar in sports, create these rich, integrated data sets for each athlete performance, training, wellness, well-being data, all together.
Standardize how we measure things, then use stats and machine learning to build predictive models.
Exactly. But the key part, the really novel aspect of precision medicine that's relevant here is the continuous feedback loop.
Constantly refining the models.
Yes, based on how the individual athlete responds to interventions. It's that constant updating that drives individualization and accuracy. The goal is a data-driven system where the athlete's response feeds back to improve the predictions, putting the athlete truly at the center.
That sounds like the direction things need to go.
Okay, let's dig into some of those specific off-training areas being profiled. First up, physical activity and, maybe surprisingly, sedentary behavior, even in athletes. Yeah, it sounds weird, but research shows elite athletes aren't necessarily super active all day outside of training. Objective tracking, like with accelerometers, has actually found some athletes have high levels of sedentary time, sitting time.
And that's a worry because we know sitting too much is bad for health, even if you exercise intensely at other times.
Precisely. The health risks associated with being sedentary don't just disappear because you train hard for a few hours. So finding that balance between active recovery and just, well, sitting around too much is a real challenge for athletes.
And the article mentions that just using wearables to nudge athletes to move more hasn't really worked so far.
Yeah, simple move more alerts don't seem very effective for this group. The authors suggest we might need more complex strategies, maybe integrating wearables with social apps, adding feedback, competition, goal setting, things that have worked better in the general population.
Right, making it more engaging than just a buzz on the wrist. Okay, next, sleep. We know it's vital, especially for athletes' recovery.
Oh, absolutely fundamental. It impacts everything. Brain function, metabolism, immune system, muscle repair, avoiding overtraining. And it's not just how long you sleep, but the quality, the timing, the sleep phases.
And we can track this with wearables now, things like actigraphy, but also just asking athletes with questionnaires. But the wearables have limits.
They do. Wrist-worn trackers give us good info on overall patterns, movement, maybe heart rate during sleep, but accurately identifying specific sleep stages. That's still tricky for many consumer devices. Plus, companies often don't give researchers access to the raw sensor data, which limits deep analysis.
Interesting. And there's a finding that elite athletes might actually sleep less than non-athletes sometimes.
Some studies have found that, yeah, could be due to training schedules, travel, stress, lots of factors.
But there are efforts to personalize sleep advice using algorithms.
Yes, like using clustering algorithms on questionnaire data. Grouping athletes with similar sleep issues or patterns allows for more targeted recommendations, whether it's suggesting specific therapies for poor sleepers or just reinforcing good habits for those sleeping well.
Makes sense. Moving to nutrition and eating behaviors. Clearly critical for performance and well-being.
Can't overstate its importance. It fuels everything, drives adaptations to training. Periodized nutrition-changing diet based on training phase is a big concept here.
But while we know a lot about sports nutrition, using big data and tech for real-time monitoring is still kind of catching up.
It seems that way. The knowledge base is huge, but integrating pervasive computing and analytics for easy tracking and personalized advice is still developing, though there are cool examples using AI.
Like recognizing food from pictures.
Yeah, like the Nutrinet project using image recognition. And AI can also help automate mapping those foods to nutrient databases, which saves a ton of time and analysis.
That automation could be huge, not just for performance nutrition, but maybe even for things like anti-doping monitoring.
Potentially, yeah. But a major concern the article raises is low energy availability, LEA and RED-ES, relative energy deficiency in sport. Can you explain those for listeners?
Sure. LEA is basically when an athlete isn't eating enough energy to cover their training plus their basic bodily needs. And if that goes on long enough, it can lead to RDS.
Which is a syndrome with widespread negative effects. It messes with metabolism, hormones, bone health, immunity, heart health, even psychological well-being. And it's surprisingly common across many sports.
Wow. But it's hard to screen for.
Very difficult. We lack clear, agreed-upon guidelines and normal values for athletes. But technology might offer some help here, particularly wearables for monitoring eating behaviors.
How would that work? Detecting hand movements?
Potentially, yeah. Using sensors and watches to detect hand-to-mouth gestures. Or using more complex data analysis like machine learning on heart rate variability to try and classify different eating patterns or states.
Detecting unhealthy patterns in real time.
Could be incredibly valuable for catching things like LEA or ADS early and intervening before they become serious problems.
Absolutely. Okay, last specific area, the menstrual cycle in female athletes. increasingly seen as a key health marker with performance implications.
Yes, it's definitely gaining recognition as a vital sign for female athletes. Disruptions can indicate underlying health issues and impact quality of life. Many athletes report feeling performance changes related to their cycle.
But the research trying to pin down direct effects on strength or power is a bit inconsistent.
It has been, yeah. Often due to challenges in the research itself, small study sizes, not actually measuring hormone levels, inconsistent ways of defining cycle phases, so more work needed there.
How do athletes typically track their cycles now? Calendars, apps.
Those are common methods, yeah. Calendar counting, basal body temperature, and increasingly smartphone apps.
But the apps aren't always accurate in predicting the phases.
Studies have shown their predictions can be quite off compared to actual hormone levels. Right now, people mostly track for diagnosing issues or family planning.
But the big opportunity, the article suggests, is using this tracking hopefully more accurately in the future to understand the links between the cycle, wellness, and performance.
Exactly. Especially given the known connection between menstrual dysfunction and REDS, and the potential links between psychological well-being, cycle phase, and performance. It's a really important area for future focus.
Definitely. So, bringing this all together, this deep dive really highlights how AI and data analytics are just becoming woven into the fabric of elite sports, isn't it?
Absolutely. Across the board, personalized training, equipment, recruitment, and this holistic view of athlete health and well-being.
And for students listening, people like you who are learning about this field or planning to enter it, it feels like there are just so many areas still wide open for innovation and research.
Oh, completely. Based on what we've discussed, think about developing better ways to encourage healthy activity off training, making sleep tracking from wearables more accurate and useful, advancing that real-time eating behavior detection.
Improving menstrual cycle tracking for athletes, figuring out how reliable those self-report measures really are alongside objective data.
Exactly. Lots of challenging and rewarding work to be done. Validating those subjective reports is a big one, too.
It really is a dynamic field, super exciting time to be involved where AI, data, and sports collide. So maybe a final thought for everyone listening to mull over.
Okay.
As AI gets even smarter and wearable tech becomes even more integrated and powerful, how might that partnership, that athlete-AI collaboration, fundamentally change training and competition in ways we haven't even thought of yet?
That is the big question, isn't it? What does the future athlete even look like in that context?
Yeah, something to think about. We definitely encourage you to check out the research we mentioned if this conversation sparked your interest. Thanks for taking the deep dive with us today.